Hello and welcome to this update from the Global Nutrition Cluster's Global Thematic Working Group for Infant and Young Child Feeding in Emergencies. Infant and young child feeding is a life or death issue in emergencies, and yet adequate and appropriate support for these youngest victims is often overlooked. The Infant Feeding in Emergencies Core Group, also known as the IFE Core Group, exists to change this. As the globally recognised body for infant and young child feeding in emergencies, the IFE Core Group drives evidence-based guidance, supports frontline practitioners, and champions the needs of those most vulnerable in humanitarian response. Since 2018, the Infant Feeding in Emergencies Core Group has also been the Global Thematic Working Group on Infant Feeding in Emergencies as part of the Global Nutrition Cluster, and thus supports the cluster and field practitioners in this role. You can find us on our website or on the Global Nutrition Cluster website. The IFE Core Group exists to protect, promote, and support effective infant and young child feeding in emergencies practices. It's been in existence for 25 years and is a collaboration of United Nations agencies, non-governmental organisations, donors, and independent members. Take a look. Is your organisation there? Let's start with what we don't do. The Infant Feeding in Emergencies Core Group does not do programming or implementation. Our members, UN and NGOs, do that. We don't develop training materials or guidelines in the sense of World Health Organization guidelines. There are others, especially United Nations and NGOs, that do that. However, we do review those documents to ensure that they draw on the latest evidence and meet the best possible practice standards. We do not ensure compliance with or do any monitoring of the International Code for the Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes. Again, that's the responsibility of other agencies. So what does the IFE Core Group do? The IFE Core Group develops and supports the development of technical and operational guidance and standards on infant and young child feeding in emergencies. The IFE Core Group's foundational guidance is the Operational Guidance on Infant and Young Child Feeding in Emergencies, first published in 2001. That's the document there in yellow. This put infant feeding in emergencies on the humanitarian map. The operational guidance was revised in 2017 and is now in its third edition. We ensure that it's updated and available in different languages, that it's disseminated, and that it's actually used. The operational guidance provides the gold standard for policy and practice in infant and young child feeding in emergencies, both at global and local levels. If you're not familiar with it, please make sure you take a look. Since 2011, the operational guidance has underpinned the SPHERE standards guidance on infant feeding. The operational guidance is available in English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Italian, Croatian, Portuguese, Bangla, Japanese, Bahasa Indonesia, Hindi, Turkish, and Ukrainian. And we're always keen to support other translations if necessary. The IFE Core Group also provides additional guidance when necessary. For example, some of our recent operational guidance has been on breastfeeding counselling in emergencies. We've also produced recently the Complementary Feeding in Emergencies Roadmap, and we've looked at ways of working with other practitioners. In this example, with the MAMI practitioners. You can search for resources on our website. We also create stopgap guidance. Where guidance doesn't exist or is not up to date in terms of infant feeding, we may fill that gap by creating stopgap guidance that responds to emerging or unmet needs. For example, we've created guidance on breastfeeding in the context of infectious diseases such as COVID and Mpox. And we're currently creating guidance on breastfeeding in the context of cholera. We've also created guidance on infant feeding in the context of chemical, biological, and nuclear incidents. Stay tuned for our upcoming guidance on cholera and infant feeding, and also guidance on wet nursing. We also advocate and support advocacy. Some examples are our joint statements, like this one on Ukraine or on Mpox. In addition, we advocate for accurate information and communication on infant and young child feeding in emergencies in media and communications. Please do take a look at these resources and share them with your organisation's comms team to ensure that you are giving out accurate messaging on infant and young child feeding in emergencies. We engage with various partners and platforms at national, regional, and global levels to ensure that infant and young child feeding in emergencies continues to be a priority and that best practices and latest evidence are used. We review and provide technical input to other agencies or members' documents or products when requested. The technical input of the IFE Core Group is absolutely essential to ensuring that quality information and guidance on infant and young child feeding in emergencies is created and shared. We also share learning and good practices, mostly through our infographics and webinars. We have produced 6 infographics and a number of webinars. Again, you can find them on our website. We share learning and document evidence and gaps in evidence through our research repository. This is the place to find the most up-to-date research on infant and young child feeding in emergencies. In addition, the Infant and Young Child Feeding in Emergencies Resource Hub is maintained by our member, Save the Children. There you can find all the trainings, guidance, and other materials about infant and young child feeding in emergencies that you need. The Infant Feeding in Emergencies Core Group has had a huge impact in its 25 years of existence. 25 years ago, the humanitarian sector had no guidance on infant and young child feeding in emergencies. Now, the IFE Core Group is the globally recognised body for infant and young child feeding in emergencies. We put infant and young child feeding in emergencies on the humanitarian map. Our aim in the coming years is to ensure that this work and guidance is disseminated to practitioners in the field and is put into practice so that they can better support infants and young children and their mothers and caregivers to survive and thrive. One way that the Infant Feeding and Emergencies Core Group aims to do that is by creating a community of practice that will allow many more practitioners to have a two-way dialogue with the core group, so that we can share and learn more effectively between practitioners, policymakers, programmers, and others working on infant and young child feeding and emergencies. So please visit our website, use the resources, and we hope to see you soon in our events and in our community of practice. Thank you.